Today, this lawnmower was dropped off. It's a Briggs Stratton engine, quantum power, 4-horse. You know this is quite old. They don't measure in horsepower anymore. Everything is cc's. But this engine looks similar to the old Tecumsehs about this time period. The complaint on this mower is that when the owner went to start it, it was leaking gas. When he put it away last year, it was running. When he put gas in it this year, all the gas stripped right out. So the first thing I'm going to do, got to take this air cleaner off, and you can either use a screwdriver or an 8mm socket. I already loosened this up. The air filter's not in bad shape, could be changed. And in here, there should be 3 screws. This screw I've already taken out. This one was missing, and this one I'll take out now. Again, it's 8mm. I'm working outside today. It's a beautiful day. My bench has a few other projects. This was an unexpected repair coming in today. All right, let's see what we have. My first suspect, I was hoping that this gas line was cracked, but it doesn't look like it. So it could be leaking from the carburetor, it could be a seat and needle valve issue. What I'm going to do is pour some gas in here and see where this leak is coming from. Okay. Now once we find the leak, I'm not even sure if this thing runs. So that start with the leak problem first here. See, I don't see anything. I don't see anything leaking out. Well, what I'm going to do next is, when it does have oil in it, I already checked the oil. A little dirt. I'm going to try starting this and see when it spins if anything's going to be leaking through here. I have to put the camera down for this. Okay, this started on the 3rd pull. It started right up, and you can see how it was smoking with the choke fully on. But as soon as I backed off on the choke, it stalls out. And while it was running, you can see the smoke. That was the excess gas it was burning. It wasn't burning oil. Right at the tip of my finger. Well, that goes in right here. That hole with the rubber gasket on it. And what you do when you disconnect the hose, just turn it, twist it, and it comes right out. Just want to point that out. So you can see this all has to be cleaned up in here, and I'm pretty sure that's where the gas leak was. But now we have an issue of it not running. So let's take this carburetor inside. Before I start taking it apart, I put that bowl back on, and I'm going to clean this off, not to get this debris on the inside of the carburetor as I work on it. And keep track of this O-ring over here. This is very important. If you don't put this O-ring back on, this machine won't run right, because it'll be sucking air in. I had this carburetor outside, and I cleaned it up. And what I used to clean it up, I put fresh gas in the tank. But when I drained it out, it had all kinds of debris in it. So I used that gas to clean off the outside of the carburetor. You can see the difference on it. This doesn't affect the performance, but the dirt that was out here won't be going on the inside now. All right. Remember, when you put in this carburetor back together, there's this gasket, don't forget it. And this is your main jet here. If you can see, that hole has to be clear. Let's see if I get a close-up on the camera. This hole right here has to be clear. Has to be clear in here. And this one doesn't have it, but on a lot of these main jet, oh wait, maybe over here. No, that's just a speck of dirt. Some of them have a tiny hole in the thread, in one of the threads right near the top. I don't see one on this, but I'll be cleaning this out with a thin wire. You can see how small that hole is. You want to use a brass or copper if you could. Don't stick a drill bit in there and make that hole larger. Now, I'm going to take this float off. Get yourself a rag when you're working on this so if anything falls, it doesn't bounce off your table. And the t-shirt that you ruined on the last job works great for this. All right, inside here you have the seat. I don't have a kit for this carburetor, so you don't want to spray any carburetor cleaner in there because that seat will swell and it won't get any gas going through. But I will be spraying carburetor cleaner openings here. I'll be opening this up in here. There should be a couple. Yeah, I need a new gasket for over here also. Okay, I'm gonna have to find a gasket for this. Now, you can see all these ports. You want to make sure all this is cleaned out in here. And on this side, there's usually a couple of holes. The camera's not going to pick it up. Let's see. If you look at the upper part of the blade of the screwdriver, I'll touch it, and then I'll move the screwdriver. If you can see it, there's a tiny hole there. You want to make sure all those holes are clean. That feeds the carburetor, that's the idle. I only see one. Generally, there's a couple in there. But I'm going to take this all apart. I'm going to take this O-ring out. Like, you don't want to, again, you don't want to spray carburetor cleaner. And I'm going to pull this out and clean in here also. So I'm going to shut this camera off right now and get it away. Because as I'm cleaning, I don't want it spraying up on the camera. And I'm having a hard time working with this camera in the way. Once I have it all done, I'll put it back together. And we'll be changing that hose also. All right, I have the carburetor all cleaned up. I'm putting that back together. But meanwhile, what I'm going to do, I'm going to clean this up with a little bit of the gas that I have, this brush, and then I'm going to hose this off. I'm just going to hose it right down. Here's where the carburetor goes, and your gas gets into your engine here. I have this wine cork. Save these wine corks, they're pretty handy. I whittled it down a little bit, and I'm just going to plug in that hole. Because no matter how careful you are, you're always going to get something splashing up. I don't want any water going into the head. So I'm going to clean this up, hose it down, and when I'm ready to put that carburetor back on, I'll be back and I'll show you how I get that on. I cleaned this out as good as I'm going to get it today. I used that little wire to get in these ports here. I sprayed carburetor cleaner into this, and inside, right in here, there were two tiny little holes. The camera's not going to pick it up, but you can see where that butterfly's going up and down on the lower end. There were two holes over there. I cleaned it from this side, and I sprayed. First, I poked it with the wire in these holes, and then I sprayed, and there's a third hole back in there. See it to the right hand side in the shadow? There we go. Poked all those out, sprayed it with the carb cleaner, did it several times. The openings in these jets, I made sure I cleaned these out. You can see through it now. Let me see if I can. And you can see the white in the back. Poked down to here, I sprayed this out several times. I put the nozzle for the carb cleaner on here. Made sure the spray came out both ends, both sides. Then I did one side and I held this, made sure it went through the other side. I just sprayed and sprayed, it kept going. When I use carburetor cleaner, I try to spray it into something, and this is how much carburetor cleaner that it actually used. And that's been sitting there for a couple hours. I took a break and went inside. But I'm going to put this together now, and let me show you how that's done. You have your float. You want to check your float, make sure there's no liquid in there. These plastic floats hold up pretty good, but if you have one of the old metal ones, sometimes they leak, and that'll cause you problems there. You have the needle. You want to check the tip of that, make sure that's okay. If not, you have to buy a new one. You have the float. The needle slides into its little slot. We didn't take the seat out, so there's nothing to do with the seat. Okay, and you just drop it in. Now, one way you could check on these to make sure that it's working is get a clean hose. And while this is in this position, if you can't blow through it, this is closing properly. And the way it works, for those of you that are new to this, When the float is down like this, gas flows in. It fills up this bowl. When the bowl's full, the float goes up. It stops the gas from flowing into the bowl, not to flood it out. As the gas is being used, the float goes down, opens it up, and lets the fuel flow through. All right. You have to make sure there's rubber gaskets on here. I didn't pull this one off because I don't have one that fits. And this one isn't cracked. Has a little smudge on it here and there, but it's not cracked. The bowl's in real good shape. There's no corrosion in it. There's hardly any dirt in it when I took it apart. And we have this. Now we have to put the main jet in. Don't forget the little gasket. Now, if you don't have this particular model, some of these bowls, they have an indentation, and it's got to go on the right way, otherwise it won't allow that float to go down. Get it a little snug. Just until you feel it tightening up, and then just give it a little. And that's it. Now, I'm going out to clean off that machine a little bit. I'm going to cut a length of hose for this, and then we'll install this. All right, the carburetor's put together. Don't forget this O-ring. Putting the O-ring on the tube here. You want to get this. And just wiggle it to get it into the carburetor. There you go. And that's it. The O-ring's on. And now we'll get these two bolts in. Get it nice and tight. Now the spring I was talking about when I first took it off is right here. And playing around with this, I noticed that this piece here is supposed to close the choke when it's down, and it wasn't closing. Right now it's all the way up. I had to bend this a little bit to get it to close, because what would happen, it would close it, and then it wouldn't be able to close again. I'll show you what I mean. See how it's closed now? This piece has to rub against here, and this other piece right here, hope the camera's picking it up, opens the choke. And the spring gives it the tension that it needs. Bring it back. Want to be careful not to overstretch your springs. And that's it as far as this goes. Now, we have the air cleaner holder. And don't forget the gasket that goes on. Get myself set up here. And when you put this on, you want to remember to get this tube in. But before we go any further, I have to put that new gas line on. So I'm going to put this gas line on. I'm going to mount this back on with the gasket. Put the tank back on. And once I'm done with that, I'll be back. We changed the fuel line. The original complaint was that it had a fuel leak and it looked like it was coming from the fuel line. I filled it up with gas and let it sit for a while, and it's to the same level that I left it at, and I don't see it leaking down below. We took the carburetor off, we cleaned the carburetor, we adjusted the choke. There was a problem with the choke linkage, and we cleaned it up somewhat. Now let's see if it's going to start. There's fresh gas. The oil could be changed. I'm not sure if he wants the blade sharpened, but let's see if it starts. And once I start it, I'm going to shut it down and then try and start it in again. Okay, let's get this camera set up out of the way. Okay, we got this camera set. Choker's on. Now let's see. So the blade's not holding anything. Pump it up. There we go. And we did clean the spark plug. If you look at the spark plug, you can see it was pretty fouled. Well, I don't know how old this machine is, but this is a solid deck, and I haven't seen one like this in I don't know how long. If you get a hold of one of these old machines and you can keep it running, don't even think about buying a new one. Keep these old machines going. They are solid. They don't rot out. A little bit of maintenance and they'll last forever. I'm going to try to start it one more time. Then I'm going to go off camera. I'm going to go cut some grass and see if it bogs down in the grass. If it doesn't bog down and it's cutting the way it should, it's a go. Let's try starting it one more time. I didn't even give it a full pull and it started right up. So this engine starts right up. There's no problem with it. And I didn't get this in the beginning. It was pretty dirty. It's a Troy Bilt. It's called a mulching mower. And it has front wheel drive. The wheels are worn out on it. But like I said, this thing's built like a mini tank. That's a wrap for now. If you enjoyed this video, found it useful, or have any questions, let me know by posting your questions and comments down below. If you enjoyed it, give it a like, and be sure to share it with someone else who may find it useful. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe and hit that notification bell not to miss any of my new videos as I upload them. Until next time, stay safe.